Science is important for a person of faith for many reasons. We need to reconcile the conflicts that exist today between what the Bible teaches and what natural science claims. And to do this, we need to have a good understanding of science. It is also important because through science, we're exploring God's creation and learning about the many wonderful design features that He has provided for us. This education will inevitably lead us to a better appreciation of our Father in heaven. Well, one of the most remarkable things that God made is the microbial world. The microscopic world is truly a wonderful place. As a person who has worked for many years in biotechnology, I have spent countless days on a microscope. For example, using the image analysis system shown here when I was a young research technician, determining the lengths of cells that we were culturing or looking for signs of contaminations in my cultures. Entering the microbial world in this way allows us to view a part of God's creation never before seen by human eyes. We're able to see single-cell organisms in their native habitat and watch the elegant ways in which they move. Or marvel at the beautiful geometric shapes of single-cell algae, these diatoms shown here. Truly, we're fortunate to live in a time when technologies of microscopes and telescopes have enabled us to explore parts of God's creation that were previously unseen. Truly, God's handiwork has been revealed to us like no other time in history. Powerful microscopes like the electron microscope shown here can magnify images up to 100,000 times their original magnification and have resolving power up to about 2 nanometers. At such magnifications, cells like the diatoms that we see here can be seen with exquisite detail found on the surface, or the engineering possessed by another diatom species shown here, or the structural design feature of the protective plates covering a coccolithophore algae. Such observations alone should be enough to convince an observer of the reality of intelligent design. But a worldview can be a very blinding thing for a person to even the most obvious of evidence. Well, what we have learned is that the cell is tremendously complex. Now, drawing an analogy from our experiences is difficult because of this. There's really nothing in human experience that compares to the complexity that we see in the cell. Our marvels of modern technology pale in comparison. The cell contains orders of magnitude more moving parts than a big jet airplane like a Boeing 747. Even a Boeing factory full of airplanes doesn't even come close to the complexity we see in the microscopic world. The cell is truly more complex than an entire city. The cell is, in a word, unparalleled in its complexity. There is simply nothing on Earth that can serve as an adequate comparison for the complexity that we find in the cell. It has countless molecular machines. Some of these we call enzymes. Factories full of machines, in fact. We call these organelles. It has a central library of information and a system to distribute that information to the various factories and workers. An infrastructure called a cytoskeleton that's shown here. And in fact, highways that self-assemble along with armies of delivery vehicles carrying manufactured goods where needed. Truly, the cell is unparalleled in its complexity and design. There is nothing else that we have seen that compares to that. Well, little was known about the cell in Darwin's day, or the vast complexity found within. Darwin himself stated that if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed that could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down, but I can find out no such case. Well, Darwin and his contemporaries didn't know about molecular machines that are irreducibly complex, that cannot be assembled by numerous successive slight modifications. They had to have been created as an integrated whole. Molecular machines such as those that serve as a highway of the cell. Note here the highways of the cell shown in this video. Highways that are full of machines like the kinesin, shown here in this animation, a nanoscale micro robot carrying a vesicle full of manufactured goods down its microtubule highway. Armies of machines are used for processes like cell division. Note the activity in this time-lapse clip of the armies of machines that are processing this cell, readying it for division. Machines are used for the movements of cells, like these single-celled ciliates that are covered with little motors called cilium that work by a coordinated wave-like manner to help them swim. Or other cells like the flagellates. This cell has an outboard motor that spins, enabling it to swim through water. Amazing design features seen in these molecular machines. Ladies and gentlemen, bacteria, the smallest of all organisms, also have a flagellum, but one that is completely different from structurally and functionally from the flagellum found in the much larger eukaryotic cell like the one we just see. And with speeds of up to 60 cell lengths per second. Notice how fast these things are swimming. These are bacteria swimming with flagellum. They're swimming at up to 60 cell lengths per second. If you compare that with another animal like a cheetah on the body length per second basis, the bacteria is swimming close to 164 miles an hour compared to a cheetah only 25 miles an hour. Well, the flagellum is a remarkable thing. It is a nano machine that is built using the information from approximately 50 different genes and is composed of up to 40 different proteins, each of them in multiple copies ranging from just a few to tens of thousands. The bacteria then constructs this complex nanoscale structure more efficient than any human design process. And everyone recognizes that this resembles a machine designed by humans. Even flagellar expert David Rosier says this in the journal Cell. It is the world's smallest rotary propulsion system, and it has all the parts that we would place in a motor. It is constructed of proteins with different functions. Some serve as a rotary motor. Others serve as the bushings. Others serve as the drive shaft. There's a rotation switch regulator. There's a universal joint. There's a helical propeller and a rotary promoter that allows for self-assembly. In every way, it resembles a machine designed by humans. But evolutionists argue that it was not designed, but rather evolved. Well, ladies and gentlemen, one of the most spectacular discoveries of our generation is that information governs the biological world. Biological information exists in the cells of all organisms as this complex molecule we call DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid. Well, this molecule carries coded instructions for the assembly and use of proteins in cells, and proteins are the machinery and material that make life possible. Proteins do everything. Some are the molecular machines we saw, or enzymes to help digest your food, or building blocks for structures like fingernails and hair. Everyone acknowledges that DNA is information. Even Bill Gates says it is by far the most sophisticated program around. Well, the fact that DNA is coded information causes it to stand as the single most powerful argument there is for intelligent design. Because in all human experience, information invariably originates from an intelligent source, from a mind or personal agent. When it was discovered that information governed the biological world, it should have led to the conclusion that DNA was also the result of an intelligent mind. Because, ladies and gentlemen, that's how science is supposed to work. Well, since intelligence is the only known cause of specified information, the presence of information-bearing sequences in biological systems points definitively to the designing intelligence behind life on Earth. Well, the amount of information packed into each cell is mind-boggling. And to help you understand this, the DNA molecule is shaped like a ladder that's twisted into what we call a double helix, shown as this animation here to your right. Well, each rung or step of that ladder can be made up of 4 different nucleotides, molecules we call nucleotides, that are abbreviated with the letters A, T, C, and G. And just like the letters in our alphabet make up coded information, the letters of the DNA chain, the sequence of molecules along this DNA chain, represent a code. Okay, well, if each letter of the DNA code is equivalent to a letter in our alphabet, then the amount of information in one human cell is about equivalent to the amount of information and that is in 1,000 books. Or to put it another way, a little 2 millimeter size pile of DNA has about as much information as there are in 500 stacks of books reaching the moon, or a single stack of books reaching the sun. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the amount of information in a stack of books 93 million miles high. That's how much information is in one little pinhead-sized pile of DNA. And of course, the evolutionists believe that all of this information came about by random mutations. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, that random changes to genetic code can produce more genetic code is simply an affront to reason. It's an affront to logic, and it's an affront to common sense to propose that you can randomly change the letters in a book and create more books. But ladies and gentlemen, that is exactly what evolutionists are proposing today, that this complex code, that all of this information that governs the biological world came about through pure chance, through random processes like mutations. Well, despite the overwhelming evidence of design found in cells, a scientist that is committed to naturalism must refuse to acknowledge the obvious implications of these observations, that is, that the world was created. Francis Crick, for example, was the co-discoverer of the DNA helix who won the Nobel Prize for discovering the DNA helix in 1962. He admits to seeing evidence of design, but states that biologists must constantly keep in mind that what we see is not designed, but rather evolved. Ladies and gentlemen, God has made the world with abundant evidence that it was created. But why can these natural scientists not see? Well, Paul speaks to this in Romans. He said, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculations, and their foolish hearts was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools." Ladies and gentlemen, that is the nature of science today. They simply refuse to acknowledge the truth of what they see.